Hi, EDU 537. I'm back again to give you a brief mini lesson, really more an overview of what this week is about and the kinds of skills and the sorts of topics that you're going to be covering in some of the resources that I've provided that you'll be taking a look at during the week. So this is an important week because you're really creating the basis of developing meetings and leading meetings. And you're also going to be asked to understand how listening takes place, what active listening is really about, and how emotions can play an important part in the listening that you do to your colleagues in team meetings and that you do for your co-teachers and also for your students. So hopefully there's some benefit to looking at and trying and practicing some of the skills that we're going to be talking about. So these are important skills. Also, because the listening skills are going to require some follow-up when we talk about coaching in week 5 in our first synchronous session. So be aware of how to listen and practice listening this week and next week so that you get a clear understanding of how listening works. At the same time, you're going to be writing a reflective report, I think in week 7, about meetings and meetings in your district and at your school. And the handout that I've provided you this week should give you some insight into how those meetings work. So one of the things that I've provided for you is a voiced handout about getting the red out, which is a step-by-step model that allows you or encourages you to accept and recognize different kinds of emotions that might be disruptive in your lives, in your professional life, and at meetings that you can then deal with in a way through active listening that allows the speaker to feel acknowledged and heard and allows you and the team to move on. So there's a specific step-by-step model that I have in the voiced handout that I'm going to ask you to take a look at. Please practice these skills. So use them in your personal life, use them with your colleagues, use them at your school, use them with your students and see how they work, because they're really designed for creating more meaningful conversations and moving conversations toward their intended outcomes. So ideally, once you've completed these listening skills and tried them out, people will feel heard, and after a series of check-ins, you will move them to yes. One of the things that I've also included this week is a TED Talk by William Ury, who's written the book Getting to Yes, who's really an expert on listening. He's a negotiator and someone who's studied listening for most of the past 30 years. So he has some insight into the power of listening, and his advice is to ground yourself and listen to yourself too before you go into working with other people. And always kind of still yourself, ground yourself, center yourself when it comes to talking to a colleague or talking to a student, especially about a behavior that might be disruptive or that you might have some difficulty with. So he talks a little bit about that, gives us some background on listening, and then take a look at that voiced handout to see that step-by-step process that will engage your colleagues and can engage family members, loved ones, and others in the process of being acknowledged and being heard. That's very important as a leader, because as a leader, you want to make sure that you connect and engage with your followers and connect and engage with the people with whom you're going to be working. So you want to make sure, again, to practice these skills this week and next. And when it comes to coaching, you want to engage a colleague in looking at a lesson and developing a pre-observation, observation, and post-observation protocol that can help them improve their performance. The second thing that's involved this week is running teams. So running teams is complicated. There's a lot to think about, but the handout that I've provided you on teams is pretty clear. It takes work. Use your listening skills if you're in a leadership capacity at a meeting, or even if you're in a followership capacity, and help engage people and move them along so that the meeting can be successful. Facilitating meetings requires that you take the big picture and that you really watch everybody who's involved in the meeting and determine how your team is working. In both listening and team facilitation, you need to pay attention. You need to listen to what's being said and also, more importantly, how it's being said. And in the parlance of the listening handout that I provided you, you want to be in the center of the storm. You want to be on the balcony and you want to have some objective look at and be objective about how your team is functioning and how you're conducting the meeting, as well as what your team members or your colleague is saying to you, so that you can step back and help acknowledge their feelings and acknowledge what they're saying and really hear them in a way that's going to give them some confidence and develop some trust in you as a leader. So in the meeting handout, you go through things like purpose, you go how to establish norms at a meeting, you go through how to develop outcomes, things you need to keep in mind. For example, always keeping an agenda, always developing outcomes and writing out the minutes so that everybody at the meeting understands what took place. And again, the more objectivity in that, the better. In addition, at the end of the team facilitation handout that I provided you, there's a checklist. What I'm going to ask you to do is over the next couple of weeks, look in on a meeting at your school. Could be a grade level meeting, could be a team meeting, could be a co-teaching meeting, it could be a Board of Education meeting or a faculty meeting. Take a look at that checklist and think through how successful that meeting was. So your second reflective report, that 2-pager that I'm going to ask you for in week 7, that you're going to design with some colleagues, and I'll open that up after week 5 so that you and a couple of other of your group of other people with whom you're going to be working with in the course can sort of look over what you've written, what you've thought about, and you can look over what they've written and what they've thought about to sharpen the focus and make it as effective as possible. Take a look at that meeting checklist that's sitting at the end of your team facilitation handout, and use that checklist to observe a meeting. So hopefully you'll be able to sit back a little bit and see how some of those items on the checklist, like an agenda, like a purpose, like people listening to one another during the meeting, like creating some sort of an outcome and working and encouraging individuals toward the job of the team and recognizing how that should work. All those things are included in that checklist at the end. Use that checklist to observe a meeting. And in your reflective paper, talk about how successful or unsuccessful your meeting was. What happened during your meeting? Did your meeting actually fulfill these best practices for meetings? Or did your meeting not fulfill? Did it not show you? Did you not see these kinds of skills that were evidenced during the meeting? And if not, what's the result? What did you think about the meeting? Give us a sense and give your colleagues and me a sense of how well that meeting progressed, what the process was like, and whether or not that meeting was successful based on that checklist. Yes, no, that happened. If it didn't happen, how did that affect the meeting? If it did, how did that make the meeting successful? So be thinking about that. As leaders, you're going to be working in meetings. As leaders, you're also going to be responsible for listening well to other leaders and to your followers so that you can move them forward to your intended outcomes. I've also popped in a very quick video which gives you an example of what active listening is like. So some of the things that are talked about in the listening handout, as well as how meetings operate, will be evident in there, and hopefully that'll give you a model that you can use to succeed in your listening skills. I hope to hear back from you and hear how well you've done and what you've learned about listening in the process, as well as team facilitation. And I look forward to your reflective reports and your discussions during week 3. So thanks so much for listening. I hope you're enjoying the course. Please let me know if you have any questions. Take care, and I hope to see you soon. I'll definitely see you in week 5 when we talk about coaching. Take care.